Preeti, tell me about yourself.
So, about myself, I was born in the UK, raised in India, medical school in Nepal, and then decided to move to Australia where they had the great beaches and the barbecues, and landed up in sunny Perth where I did all my basic and advanced training. And then pretty much finished up as a registrar on a Friday evening and started as a consultant at the same hospital that following Monday. And it was fantastic. It's been a fantastic journey, and kept going with work as a consultant until I started to feel, I guess you could call it a bit of a 3 year into consultant work itch, and felt I wanted to do something different. That took me to a year of clinical research in Bath, UK, and that's when the pandemic hit. And also at the same time, I conceived my twin boys and welcomed them during the pandemic. And I think it's sort of that time frame in my life where things really took a big shift, because I was trying to get back into the workforce post babies and couldn't quite find something that really worked for me as a new mum with twins. But thankfully, my hashtag open to work on LinkedIn worked wonders and brought me into the telemedicine space. And that's what brought me into the world of telecare and telemedicine.
So tell me about some of the challenges you faced trying to find work and balancing that with your family.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it came to getting back to work after maternity leave, there certainly were a few challenges. I in fact had a permanent contract with a public hospital, but very quickly realized that with the babies coming along, that same job plan just wouldn't work as well for me. And it was the want for predictability and flexibility and more control and independence that really took me away from my permanent contract and into, I guess, a more freestyle way of work. And I stumbled into the world of telemedicine as a result of that, got very interested in it. Obviously, there was a huge surge during the pandemic, as you know, and there was a lot of buzz about telemedicine happening at the time. I even went through a certification course with Johns Hopkins at the time with telemedicine, which I think made me a bit of a more evident candidate for telemedicine jobs that were being offered at the time. And also my areas of training being geriatric medicine and rheumatology, both fields which are quite in demand, whether that's in Australia or even internationally. And so everything sort of fell into place when it came to the telemedicine work. But the challenges were very real, and I just couldn't go back to the same old job, and it needed to be something different so that I could strike that work-life balance that we strive so hard to achieve right from the get-go. And when you're not a consultant, I think you don't necessarily have that control because you just have to do what you need to do to get to where you need to be. But as a consultant, I think I realized that I was more empowered, that my training was in demand, and I just needed to maybe think outside the box a little bit as to how I could then leverage my expertise and create that work-life balance for myself and my family.
So how did you get in touch with telecare?
Great question. How I got in touch with telecare, this is where I believe in the hand of destiny or fate or the universe working its magic. I was on LinkedIn and I had put up the hashtag open to work, and I was actively contacting various organizations trying to get into the workforce when a telecare team member reached out to me asking whether I would be interested in joining the company to work in the telemedicine space where healthcare needs across the nation were being catered to. I was very fascinated by the work that was being done by telecare, and when I looked into it, I was like, wow, I could actually be seated right here at home and looking after patients across the country, not just my state, but interstate as well. And what really worked, I should say, is there was a hesitancy from my end where I was like, well, I might not necessarily always be in Australia. There may be periods of time where I need to be overseas, and that all comes back to what was going on with me and my family. And they said, well, let's look into that and let's see how we can make that work. And in a couple of months, they indeed came back with solutions and how to make it work. And it just goes to speak to how innovative they are in how they tackle challenges that are basically perhaps red tape or things that just have been set a certain way. And again, in keeping with the Australian Institute of Digital Health and that engage, disrupt, transform tagline, that's what they did. They found a way to make it work. And so it's been working ever since.
Can you tell us a little bit about the type of work you do with Telecare?
Sure, absolutely. So the type of work I do with Telecare is I work across a few different specialties, two different specialties. One is geriatric medicine and the other is rheumatology. So 2 or 3 different types of services within those specialities. At first, I started with providing much needed rheumatology outpatient specialist care in rural area services where the wait lists were incredibly long, with, I would say, hundreds of patients waiting extended periods of time to be seen by a specialist rheumatologist. So I started by helping out with that particular wait list. Apart from that, as a geriatrician, I took on a role as an inpatient geriatrician with the Mackay Base Hospital, where they do not have a geriatrician on site. And they have the whole MDT, they have the whole multidisciplinary team well set up to run a geriatrician-led service, but no geriatrician. And then I could dial in and be that geriatrician that works with the team. And I was very impressed by how all of that is brought together by the Telecare coordinators. And so we were providing much needed inpatient services for complex discharge planning and complex dementia related diagnosis and management services. And apart from that, there was also the GEM HIT team, which is again a separate care model where geriatric patients across the hospital and predominantly the emergency department services would refer appropriate patients to the service. And again, they needed a geriatrician to be linked to those services. And so essentially I was providing those services with the help of a multidisciplinary team to patients in their own home. So lots of different styles and lots of different ways of providing much needed patient care, which is incredibly rewarding.
Can you tell us about where you did these consultations from?
Yes. Now this is probably what is a very interesting part of my journey. So when I started off, it was from my home office in a leafy suburb in southeast Melbourne. But then after that, owing to family circumstances, I needed to be overseas for certain periods of time. So I've done some of these consultations from my dad's office in a bustling city in India, noise cancelling headphones on. And apart from that, I also had to travel to America, where I was with my sister for a period of time, so from a suburb in the US. And most recently, I also provided services from Scotland, from a very peaceful, quiet, lovely, magical place there, whilst on a locum contract with the NHS. So I never, in my wildest dreams, ever imagined that I would continue to serve the Australian population from across the globe, something that I could have only dreamt of. I had a very sort of vanilla sort of story coming from med school to basic training to advanced training to consultant. It was pretty much just a straight line. And then post-pandemic, even though it shook my world when I couldn't find that balance, it's given birth to something incredibly exciting, and I've never looked back.
Can you tell us about some of the challenges you faced doing consulting from overseas?
Yes, I definitely do need to speak to the challenges of the processes as well, because it's not all, a bed of roses. There are challenges as well. I think the Telecare team itself helps iron out a lot of those challenges. So they're not necessarily challenges that I have to take on myself. There's a really good team that supports me, but there is a lot of conversation that becomes required as a result of those challenges. I think the most important one would be managing time zones and also managing availability. So you can only imagine that if there's a patient in a hospital, in a tertiary center, in Australia, and then there's a whole team attached to that and family members attached to that, and then there's myself and my availability depending on where I'm located in any given point in time. There are going to be a few issues that needs to be ironed out, mostly trying to get everybody in the same space at the same time. And that isn't really that different from trying to do the same thing in hospital in person, because again, we all know that family meetings and complex discharge planning requires a lot of coordination. But again, in Telecare's favor is that those coordinators are absolutely amazing, and the way they bring it together seems seamless to me, but I know there's a lot of hard work happening in the background to make it happen. But for me, at the end of the day, it's saying, this is when I'm available, these are the options I can give you, and then they work their magic. The other thing that I probably should mention is the connectivity issues. So for example, when I was working out of Melbourne, I didn't really have any connectivity issues whatsoever. But on the other hand, when I was working from India briefly, there were some connectivity issues that needed to be worked on and ironed out. But apart from this, no, nothing much really else to add to the challenges aspect of this conversation.
How has working with Telecare helped you professionally?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chris. Working for Telecare has opened up my world, to put it in one line. I did always know that telemedicine was available. When I was a trainee registrar in Perth, Western Australia, we did run a few telemedicine clinics for rural populations in Western Australia, and they were few and far between, like too few and too far apart. And we had massive wait lists, but obviously as a registrar, you're just like getting the job done. You're not really thinking about the big picture. And then fast forward by many, many years, and being part of this community, being in the digital health space, I think that it's helped me move with the times and to actually be part of something that is game-changing and visionary. So when I dial in, I put on my headphones and I set up my laptop and I log in to do my consultation, it's just another day with a doctor, a patient, and their family. But when you zoom out from that and you think about Telecare and you think about, being part of a team that's 300 plus specialists and looking at how the number of patients being seen, in a year, looking at the numbers, looking at the data, looking at how much the needle's being moved, it just gives you an incredible sense of achievement and go, hey, I'm a part of that movement. And again, that's awarding professionally, personally, and also makes me feel kind of cool.
How has working with Telecare helped your family life?
Yeah. Yes. So this is probably where the journey began, when it came to how do I work? Because I love my work. I love working as a geriatrician. I love working as a rheumatologist. I love what I do. And then when my babies came along, and you know what they say with twins, double the trouble, but double the joy, absolutely the case. I also felt so stretched in so many different directions. My husband is a busy professional himself, and I'd actually gone through a long struggle with infertility before I actually welcomed the twins. So I think it was very hard for me to say, I'm just going to leave them at home or at daycare or whatever. I'm just going to go back to being that full-time professional that I was. And that's where telemedicine, I guess, almost came to the rescue. It allowed me to be a professional. It allowed me to be a career woman. It allowed me to not to have to give up on anything particularly, at least not give up on it completely, and still be able to be mom and wife and daughter and sister and have that time with family. When I started off with telemedicine, it was very baby steps, like literally baby steps while babies were in the next room with my parents. And I would be like, okay, now everybody quieten down and don't let the babies through this door. Keep them on the other side of the house. And I'll be maybe an hour, 2 hours, and I'll be back. And it worked. And I remember taking off my headphones, and I hope I don't get emotional when I say this, but I remember taking off my headphones and just being like, yep, I'm back at work. And I went to cuddle the boys. So it was great.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think final question for me. Do you have any advice for any other sort of young doctors out there who are thinking about alternative or creative careers?
Yes, absolutely yes. I do have a lot to say to young doctors, especially whether they're mums or dads or whatever their circumstances may be, whether that's wanting to do research, whether that's wanting to go part-time. obviously everybody wants work-life balance, and we all need to make money, and we all need to develop on our careers. We all want to move upwards in our career trajectory. Nobody likes being stagnant, particularly doctors. Nobody, even doctors. I don't really need to say particularly doctors, but still. And I didn't know that this space existed. So what I want to tell people is that there are lots of options out there. We need to make ourselves more aware. We need to be looking for other avenues. There is many ways to skin a cat. There are so many ways to find a professionally satisfying and rewarding career that is different to what the traditional roles may look like. And we have the qualifications, we have the expertise, we have the training, we have the know-how, we have the skills, and the demand is actually quite huge. You kind of think, when we're young doctors particularly, we have this tendency to think, oh my God, like this is the job, and if I say no, that is career suicide. And that is so not the case. I had no idea how in demand I was when I was turning down my permanent contract at that point in time, and I was exiting a permanent contract. Obviously, there were a lot of naysayers. They were like, you're not the first person to have babies, you're not the first person to, But in my family, in my circle of friends, I was the first person to return from maternity leave and do something completely different, to step into telemedicine, to do just that for a while. And gradually I felt like I needed to be back in the hospital space as well. But then by then I had become so much more empowered that I was like, okay, I'm going to find a way that makes that work as well. So as it stands, I'm now a hybrid doctor, providing hybrid care. So I work in hospital spaces, I work in clinic spaces, I'm physically there. Sometimes I'm providing virtual care, sometimes I'm working in Australia, sometimes I'm working overseas. And just to know that this is possible and to be doing that myself, I want to shout it off the rooftop, particularly to young mums, because that's where I was. Just a young mum with babies going, I worked so hard to get to where I am, and I don't want to lose it all, but I don't want to compromise. I don't want to sacrifice anything too much. And to find this space where you're not just welcomed, you're valued. And to feel that is, I think that's something everybody wants to feel. Feel seen, feel validated, feel valued. We've worked very hard. We all work very hard to get to where we are. And so to know that there are options out there, we just have to find them. So #open to work. And speak to Telecare. I'm sure they can find something for you. So yes, I want to say thank you to Telecare and its team for being that space for me.